My dad is a weird guy. Quirky, I guess. He was an Eagle Scout as a kid, and right out of college, he did a lot with the Peace Corps. Now he works in urban planning, but he still sees himself as an outdoorsman, even though the most outdoorsy thing we do is the occasional hike on the weekend, which usually ends with us picking up desserts from some new cupcake shop or ice cream store on the way home. So one summer when we were visiting the national parks in Colorado, my dad had one of his brilliant ideas. He told my mother, "Take the baby and drive down to the entrance. I want to walk there with Jack and Lily." My brother and I didn't have any say in the matter. Dad just herded us to the nature trail while Mom eagerly accepted a quiet break with my baby sister. Of course, my father didn't stick to the nature trail. He wanted to see real nature and told us, "Whatever way you go is downhill, so we'll end up at the bottom." For a while, he was right. I remember my dad pointing out different birds and woodland creatures. He told us to duck down and be quiet when we saw a family of deer. Then, inevitably, we came to a dead end. It was a sheer cliff face blocking our path. My dad realized that we'd have to go back up hills a way to find a different route back down. Both my brother and I were miserable at this point. We were tired and hungry, and my dad couldn't get a phone signal. Even as a kid, I knew my dad was getting worried. He hadn't brought any snacks or water. If it started getting dark, we were in real trouble. That's when I heard a woman's voice. "A little lost? Could you use some help?" Two figures emerged from the mist. A man and a woman, both tall and thin. My dad admitted he must have taken a wrong turn, but said he was normally much better at navigating through nature. Then the woman said something that stuck with me. "Many people have problems in this area." What did that mean? They showed us the way to the main path without climbing back up the mountain. The couple stayed a good ways ahead of us the whole time. Part of it might have been my dad trying to keep up while minding two unruly kids, but the couple kept their distance. With the mist in the air, it made it seem like the man and woman were only partially there. When we reached the main path, the woman told us they were heading uphill, so we said our goodbyes. I think my dad rushed us away because of how long we'd been gone. He knew my mom was waiting at the bottom of the mountain, ready to point out that our quick hike wasn't that quick at all. The trail led us to exactly where my mom was parked. She had just started to get worried when we arrived. My dad told her that we got a little lost, but a nice couple helped us. It wasn't until years later, thinking back to the story, that I started asking myself questions. Why was that couple so far off the trail? How did they find us? And did I ever actually see the man talk? I think he just stared at us with a concerned expression. Were they good Samaritans who stumbled on a confused man and his two kids lost in the woods? It's not a story my dad tells often. I mean, it basically makes him look like an idiot who almost got his two kids killed in the woods, so I understand why he doesn't bring it up. I just make sure that if I go on any hikes with him now, I always bring a bottle of water and a fully charged phone, just in case. Like I said, he's a weird guy. I was having the worst few months of my life. It started when I got passed over for a promotion at work. Instead, they brought in a person from outside the company who immediately had it out for me. It turned into daily bullying, calling me out in front of the entire office for mistakes that were her fault, unloading all of her responsibilities on me, spreading false rumors to the staff. It got to the point that I would sit in my car until the very last minute before going into work every morning. Then my boyfriend of 10 years, my literal childhood sweetheart, broke up with me. I thought we'd eventually get married and be together forever. I moved with him from the small town where we both grew up to a bigger city so we could find work, but he didn't hold on to any job for very long. And while dealing with all of that, my dog Charlie died. He was 14 years old and had been through several health scares before, but his body finally gave out. I picked up Charlie's ashes from the vet and decided I wanted to take the train back to my hometown to spread them in the lake near my parents' house. He loved to run around there when he was a puppy, so it felt like a good spot. I cried the whole way to the train station, full on sobbing like a child. I had reached my limit and was going through some pretty dark feelings. The station was small, but normally the place was packed on the weekends, so I was surprised that it was completely empty when I arrived. Actually, I was relieved. I was struggling to breathe through all the crying at this point. The station might have been empty because of the weather. Outside it was pouring rain, and with the fog you couldn't see 2 feet past your nose. I didn't care. It matched my mood, dark and unfriendly. I had my umbrella in one hand and the cardboard tube containing Charlie's ashes in the other. The only thing on my mind was keeping the tube dry. I didn't want it falling apart and Charlie's ashes blowing all over. When I stepped into the train station, the rain stopped. I chalked it up to more bad luck, like the weather was mocking me. The sudden stillness made the whole world silent, like someone had hit mute on everything. No wind, no rain, no birds chirping. It startled me so much that I stopped crying. I probably didn't have any tears left anyway. That's when I noticed that the empty station wasn't completely empty. There was a woman sitting on a bench at the far end of the room. She was older than me, probably closer to my mother's age if I had to guess. She wore a headscarf and several layers of clothing with hand-sewn patterns. As soon as I saw her, a wave of peace crossed over me. She was beautiful in a way that seemed completely natural. Like you wouldn't be surprised to see her on a magazine cover, but she didn't seem like she would stick out in a crowd of normal people. She had caramel skin and big brown eyes. The woman waved me over and I didn't think twice. I walked across the empty train station and sat on the bench next to her. She reached out and touched my hands. Normally, I'm not really comfortable with physical contact with strangers, but something about her made me feel, I don't know, at home. She asked me my name and told me hers, Nadia. I felt like I was alone with her, not just in the train station, but like we were the only 2 people in the world. She asked what was weighing me down and the dam broke. I unloaded everything that I'd been dealing with over the past few months. Things came out that I wasn't even conscious about, like my parents growing older while I lived so far away. The idea of them having an accident and not being able to help them lurked in the back of my mind. I must have babbled like an idiot, but she listened to everything, nodding and asking questions that showed that she was really paying attention. When I finally ran out of terrible things to tell her about, Nadia simply smiled and said, "There's a place for everyone." Normally I would have found something like that totally cringe. The kind of thing that a grandmother would sew onto a pillow. Right then, the train arrived. I didn't realize it, but I'd been talking for over 20 minutes. I stood up, but Nadia remained on the bench. I asked, "Aren't you waiting for the train?" Nadia smiled. "Not this one." It confused me because there was only one train that stopped there. But I thanked her and hurried off. I spent the entire train ride home thinking about Nadia and that feeling of relief I got talking to her. When I arrived in my hometown, I called an Uber to take me to the lake so I could spread Charlie's ashes. Along the way, I saw a new apartment building with a sign for tenants. The banner said, "A place for everyone." I burst into tears all over again. The Uber driver was totally confused, but I told him it was okay. He dropped me off at the lake, and I spread Charlie's ashes. I remembered bringing him there and how it was the happiest time of my life. Before heading to my parents' house, I stopped at that new apartment building and picked up an application. Within 2 weeks, I quit my job and moved my things into my new place. Now I'm only a 10-minute drive from my parents. I got a job working in a flower shop run by a friend from high school. For the first time in my life, I'm living alone. Well, not completely alone. I got a rescue dog named Oliver, who I take to the lake every weekend. When I think back to that conversation with Nadia, it really feels like the moment that turned my life around. I owe her everything. I pray that one day we'll cross paths again so I can thank her. But until then, I keep my eyes open for anyone who looks like they could use someone to sit and listen to them with a warm smile and the promise that there's a place for everyone. My mom loved to tell people the story of how I was saved by a good Samaritan. I was only 3 years old at the time. My parents had taken me out with them to run errands. First, we went to the bank. The tellers there always had those little dum-dum suckers to give kids when they came in with their parents. My mom said that my eyes always lit up whenever we went to the bank because I knew I was getting a treat. After the bank, my dad needed something from the hardware store, so he ran inside while Mom and I stayed in the car. At some point while I was sucking on the lollipop, it came off its stick and lodged in my throat. My mom glanced in the rearview mirror and saw me turning purple. She jumped out of the car and started screaming. She pulled me out of the back seat as a crowd of people were gathering around us. My mom described it as the most panic she'd felt in her entire life. My dad was still inside the hardware store, completely oblivious to what was happening. Then, this elderly man walked through the crowd and grabbed me from my mother's arms. He whacked me in the back a couple times and the dum-dum came flying out of my mouth. I instantly started bawling for my mommy. The old man handed me back to her, and by the time she looked up, he was gone. This wasn't a big shopping mall or anything. We lived in a pretty rural town. There was just the hardware store, its parking lot, and then the woods. My mom said the old man went in the opposite direction of the store, but she didn't see him get into any car and drive away. She wanted to thank him, but he just vanished. I'm sure my mom was caught up in everything. Her son had nearly choked to death. She wouldn't have been the most reliable witness, but she swore the old man just walked off into the woods after saving me. The last time I heard her tell this story was to the hospice nurses taking care of her at the end. I moved into my childhood bedroom to help, but these women were the true Good Samaritans. Not only did they care for my mom, they were a new audience for the stories she loved to tell. And even though I heard them 1,000 times, it was nice to hear them 1,001 times. The morning she died, the hospice nurses told me to go for a walk while they cleaned her up. Part of me wanted to stay and do something, but I listened to them. It was strange walking around my old neighborhood at 10 in the morning. I knew every street and alley, but they all seemed so different. I couldn't help thinking, how can everything be so normal and boring when my mom is gone? Then I saw him, an old man standing down the street. He was on the sidewalk, but he was completely still. We made eye contact, then he turned and walked away. I'm sure it was just someone out for a stroll, but I instantly thought of my mom's story about the Good Samaritan who saved me when I was 3. In my eulogy for Mom, I told this story and about the man I saw the morning she died. I wanted to believe that that Good Samaritan was there to guide her home. I had an existential crisis in my early 30s. The business that I started in my 20s went bankrupt. I had poured all of my free time into it for years, thinking it would eventually become my full-time gig. But I watched it fall apart due to factors beyond my control. Then my mom died. That sent me into a downward spiral. My day job became a small distraction, but without my business, I had a lot of free time on my hands, which led to going down many rabbit holes on the internet. I had major fears about life after death, or the complete lack of it, which developed into a full obsession. I desperately wanted to talk to someone who had personally experienced communication with the afterlife. I told myself that once I got that, everything would be okay. I found out that a group of ghost hunters were doing a talk at a bookshop a couple towns away, so I bugged my husband until he agreed to drive me to the event. I sat in the audience, listening to their every word, and realized they're idiots. These ghost hunters talked about the different locations they visited, going into great detail about the history of the haunting and the equipment they brought with them. But they kept glossing over what they exactly experienced, or what their equipment recorded. The whole thing was garbage that made me wonder if I'd ever get any answers. But then the old gentleman sitting behind us must have overheard because he leaned forward to say, "Bunch of rubbish, right?" I turned to agree with him and started talking. He was there with his wife, who helped spirits move on to the next realm. His stories were great. I could have listened to him for hours, but he motioned to his wife, who had been chatting with other people around the room. She walked over to us, took my hand, and said, "I'm sorry about your mother." I broke down right there in the middle of that bookstore. The couple invited my husband and me to dinner at the restaurant next door. I'm not quite sure what our husbands talked about because I spent the whole meal asking the woman questions. She never claimed to speak directly with spirits, but she would go to houses where people felt a lingering presence and helped clear them. It was strange how she said everything I needed to hear. We thanked them by paying for dinner and exchanged numbers. Riding home in my husband's truck, I felt at peace for the first time in a long while. About a week later, I wanted to give them a call and thank her again, but I couldn't find their phone number. Talking to my husband, I discovered that neither of us could remember their last name, even though I knew they'd told us. We both thought it was something generic like Thompson or Johnson, but nothing felt 100% right. My existential crisis passed. I got a new job that used the experience I got from running my own company. I consider that woman a true Good Samaritan. I never would have pulled myself out of that dark rut without her.